They always say a woman can do everything that a man can do.
Emulate, don't imitate. Take all these influences in and then create your own way of presenting them. Put a little bit of your soul into it so that it becomes it becomes undoubtedly you that people hear.
I think we should all start believing that religion is only one.
And the religion of humanity, really.
It's the religion of humanity.
Artist, as a musician, someone who I believe artists are the conscience of society. I believe that we have a duty to say something through our art.
To deliver a strong message.
Yeah.
We have a very, very rich culture.
We do. Well, I'm honestly thrilled to have been born an Indian. There is no other place in the world I would have wished to have been born.
Today we are joined by the visionary artist behind the Sufi Gospel Project. With multiple global music awards and a unique blend of Sufi poetry and Indian classical music, she is an inspiration to artists everywhere. Please join me in welcoming Miss Sonam Kalra. Good evening, ma'am. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on our show. It's absolutely a great delight for me.
Thank you. You're too kind.
So, ma'am, you've performed at over 30 countries. You've performed at the Sydney Opera House. You performed at the Pyramids of Egypt. How does it feel to have accomplished so much in life?
As I was saying to you earlier when we were just chatting, it's funny, you don't think about what you've accomplished. I think the good thing in some ways, and perhaps just it's a personality type, I wear it very lightly. So unless I'm sitting in an interview or I'm sort of writing my profile, that's when I realize, oh, I've actually done all this stuff. Of course, it feels incredible when I think about it or when I was actually doing it. Knowing that I was at the Sydney Opera House was such a huge moment for me. It was a moment of great honor and pride. And I remember thinking, I wish my mother and father had been alive to see this. And the same was with the pyramid. So it's been really special that music has been the reason, or music has blessed me enough to take me to these incredible places so that I can perform there. It's been very special. Yeah.
So when did you start performing professionally?
I started performing with the Sufi Gospel Project professionally, really, 14 years ago. And before that, I was doing smaller stuff, like I had done some jazz concerts and gospel concerts. But I would really say 14 years ago was when the Sufi Gospel Project was born. And that was when this whole incredible journey of self-realization, of creativity, of delving deep into understanding what Sufism meant to me and interpreting it in my own way happened. So 14 years ago, I think we turned 14 in May on the 11th and 12th, which were the first two concerts.
Oh.
Yeah. And really the Sufi Gospel Project happened, it kind of happened a year before my mother passed. I was invited, I'd been singing gospel music for a while, even though I never grew up listening even to gospel music, But my mother had been very sick, and during her sickness, I found myself drawn to Amazing Grace, and I kept singing this gospel hymn, Amazing Grace. And then I visited Singapore on holiday, and I walked past a music school. And I saw that music school, and I thought, what a great way to celebrate a holiday. I'm here for 5 days. Let me see if I can find a gospel teacher who can actually teach me more gospel hymns. And I walked in, and I found the most incredible teacher. She was possibly, 10 or 12 years younger than me. She was an Australian. I was an Indian wanting to learn African American music in the land of the Chinese people. So it was all these nationalities that sort of came together, which kind of was further testament to the fact that really we are all children of one humanity. And I learned from her for 5 days. And then it was so lovely that I decided I would keep trying to go back as much as I could to learn from her. She was in Singapore studying for a year. So I was able to go back for that whole year and learn from her. So I learned gospel. I performed gospel first. And then, as it is, I think everyone would be in shock. They would say, why does a girl who belongs to the Sikh religion sing Christian music? Because people like to box you into these with these labels and religions. And I used to find the question weird even then, because I would say, it doesn't matter what way I want to call out to my God in. That is personal, and that should be my choice. And then I got invited to sing gospel music at the Dargah of Sufi Inayat Khan Nizamuddin. And I think that was a huge turning point for me, because that is the first time I thought of the fact that I was a Sikh girl who was singing supposedly, you know, labeled Christian music. And I was being invited to a seemingly Islamic space to sing. And I said, the universe is trying to tell me something. And I must use this opportunity that's been granted to me to say something. I must say something of importance. I must say something of value. And that's when just intuitively the Sufi Gospel Project was formed. I knew that I wanted Indian sounds, so I reached out to a sarangi player. I got a tabla player. I had a keyboard. I had a Western flute. I had tabla, as I said. And we sort of worked on these pieces intuitively. And I remember after that first presentation at the Dargah of Sufi Inayat Khan, or Hazri as I would like to call it, after that first Hazri, when I was leaving the Dargah of Sufi Inayat Khan, the words, the Sufi Gospel Project, literally popped into my head almost as if it was a gift, a dain from the divine. And it was after that that I started delving deeper into this concept that had sort of come into my head. So first it was intuitive, as I said too, and then it was based on intellect and research. And it was so exciting for me because the more I looked for differences between these philosophies or faiths of Sufism, gospel, or even bhakti, the more in these traditions I began to find similarities. You know, like I found water. Water is used in every religion. It's used across every religion for purification, for immersion, to sort of, you know, it's always got a washing off of the sins or a baptism or an amrit. It's used across different religions. And it really made me think that, you know, just as many rivers flow into one sea, so do many faiths flow into one God. Yeah. And things like that, you know, I found other themes that were all common. And I found that across time, whether it was a Kabir who said, Kabir Das, who said, "Moko kaha dhoonde re bande, main to tere paas mein, na mandir mein, na masjid mein, na main vrat upvas mein." That why do you look for me outside or in buildings or in shrines when I'm in every breath of every man? Yeah. Versus someone like Rabia al-Basri, a Sufi mystic who said, from a different century, who said, you know, she said, "In my soul there is a temple, a shrine, a church, a mosque that dissolve in God. Prayer should bring us to an altar where no walls or names exist. In my soul there is a temple, a shrine, a church, a mosque that dissolve in God." So I realized that the more I looked, the more I found similarities. And therefore I felt that there was great strength in this message that I was trying to put forward through the Sufi Gospel Project of oneness, of talking of this oneness, and of talking of the importance of faith and spirituality rather than religion. Mm. And so that's what started 14 years ago. And it's been an incredible journey for me because not only have I been able to immerse myself deeply in it and learn so much, but even my own, they weren't really definitions, but my own ideas have evolved and expanded for me to keep adding more into what this definition of the Sufi Gospel Project is.
That's beautifully put, ma'am.
Thank you.
I think we should all start believing that religion is only one.
Yeah.
There's one God.
And the religion of humanity, really.
It's the religion of humanity.
It's the most important thing.
I think we must believe in doing good.
Yeah.
Most importantly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, ma'am, it all paid off when you received 3 global music awards in 1 year. How was that for you?
I mean, it's, as I was saying to every single time, you don't actually do this for the awards, but when you get the awards, of course, it's a huge encouragement, a pat on the back for you to feel. And also, I think for me, to get acknowledged globally, you know, with the Global Music Awards, because they're not India-centric, they're America-based, US-based, and to have been accepted, as you know, into the Grammy Recording Academy as a voting member, which is judged by peers. So the Global Music Awards are also judged by peers, and so are the Grammys, right? And the Grammy Recording Academy voting member admission is judged by peers. So when you're peer-reviewed by other musicians across the world, I think to me that was a very important validation to get and a very significant one, a meaningful one. So it did feel very, very special. And I was also, I was told that I was the first woman, I think, to have received 3 Global Music Awards. I'm not sure if it was globally, but certainly in India.
That is beautiful. And you received it for Alfat
and Bol.
And Bol.
And you know, that was also exciting because Alfat, of course, is a kalam by Baba Bulle Shah, which we composed. Ehsan Ali and I composed it. He's my sarangi player. And Alfat is beautiful because Baba Bulle Shah says that, that my teachers taught me a wonderful lesson, that my temple, my shrine, my church, my mosque is not within the four walls of a building, but within the walls of my heart and within the walls of the heart of the person who's sitting next to me. And now that I have this knowledge, I will wear my ankle bells and dance. So this is Alfat.
Right.
And now Alfat is traditionally, say, a Sufi kalam. So it kind of made sense that it lent itself to becoming part of the Sufi Gospel Project. We made it a little more global. And, like I said, when the Sufi Gospel Project I created, I found that I could break all the boundaries or so-called ideas that people had of how a song should be, what language should be in it. So Alfat had the sarangi being played as an Irish fiddle, the basuri being played as an Irish flute, the tabla sounding more like Western drums. There was a bit of Farsi that I added to it. So I kind of brought in this kind of whole global sound into it. But Bol was also exciting that it became I like to believe that these pieces of poetry find me. It sort of found its way into the Sufi Gospel Project because it spoke of freedom. It spoke of speaking out and using the voice that you have, which is the strongest tool that you and I and any human being has at their disposal, to speak out against injustice, to speak out for the greater good of humanity, to speak out for the voiceless. And so when I found that piece of poetry, I thought, this is also about coming together. This is also about the religion of humanity. And I added a refrain to it which said, Bolo ek awaaz hai hum. And it sort of became part of the Sufi Gospel Project. It was very lovely for me because I think the first time that we performed this was for something called the Sounds of Freedom concert, where the legendary Bob Geldof was also going to be performing. And we got to perform it on the same stage as him. And then we collaborated on another larger song, all of us together, all the artists who were there. But it was very special because it was for the Sounds of Freedom concert. And then, before I had composed it, sorry, I'm going to go back, I had written to Faiz Ahmad Faiz Saab's daughter in Pakistan to say that I've seen this kalam, I've come upon this kalam, and I would love to compose it. May I have your permission? Because I didn't want to do anything that was wrong, copyright issues and all that. And it turned out to be so magical because his daughter Muniza ji wrote to me saying, of course you can use the kalam. And she said, in fact, we were wanting to reach out to you to invite you to come to Lahore and sing. Oh, wow. So I got to perform the kalam for the Faiz Festival in Lahore. So that was, when you were talking about what are the special moments when you've traveled abroad, this was one of the most iconic moments for me to be able to perform Faiz Sahab's poetry at a festival that has been created, in honor of him, his legacy, for his family, in Pakistan, in his homeland. And it was very special.
And then these are the small moments you cherish a lot around your journey.
And I think for me, these are the reasons, perhaps even greater than winning any kind of award.
Right.
These are the things that to make you feel like you're on the right path. So I think these are the moments that really make you feel that I must be doing something right, or at least I'm on the right path. And I think as an artist, or at least as the kind of artist I am, it's very important for me to remember the reason I sing. It's very easy to get swayed, I think, for any human being by the glitz and the glory and the fame and the appreciation. But I think if you really want to stay the course, if you want to really continue to do what you are doing in an unadulterated manner, then you have to put your head down and you have to just keep your head down on that lakir, on that line, and just follow that line and cut out all of the side noise or the distractions or the fears or the insecurities, because every artist, every human being has so many of them. So it's really hard to sort of put your head down and just stay focused on that. But that's the important thing to do. To keep asking yourself, why am I creating? Why am I doing music? Am I doing it because I want to be big and famous? Which is not a bad thing, and each person is allowed their own choice. Or am I doing it because my first choice is that my first reason is that I want to leave a legacy behind, or I want to say something that's important for me to say. And yes, if appreciation comes along the way, or if it reaches people along the way, great. So for me, I think it's that. It's that I want to have something to say. I have something to say, and I want to be able to say it through my art. I love singing, of course. I would love to sing even fun stuff and light stuff, and I do that. But for me, the most important thing as an artist, as a musician, as someone who I believe artists are the conscience of society, I believe that we have a duty to say something through our art.
To deliver a strong message.
Yeah, through our art. And it can be it can be a very simple message of telling you to feel compassion for someone. It can be telling you to find the lighter side of you, to enjoy life. But it can also be something as important as saying, speak out.
Speak out, right. What does your training in both Indian classical music and Western styles play in your musical identity?
I think it plays a huge part because it defines who I am really. I grew up listening to a lot of Indian classical music, a lot of Indian folk music, Punjabi folk music, Rajasthani folk music, but also a lot of jazz, a lot of pop, a lot of rock, because, I had two elder sisters, I had a mother and a father, and everyone's tastes were eclectic. So it was actually great because I was exposed to all these different tastes. So I think that for me to have created I created the Sufi Gospel Project because I also wanted to bring in all these influences, because I loved all these different styles of music. So there are elements of jazz that you'll suddenly hear in a version of Hallelujah, or even in Alfat,
Yeah.
There'll be a little bit of American bluegrass music. There's Irish music in it. Different languages. I have a great love for many different languages. So many different languages will play a part. I've also done theatre professionally. So, for example, when I did Hum Dekhenge, I blended it with the poetry of Rabindranath Tagore, but recited, which I asked a theatre actor, Sunil Mehra, to recite with me. And in that case, I made sure there was no instrument that played the musical interludes, but the voice. So it was me singing, and then the vocal spoken part was the interlude. And then again, there was me singing. So all these different things, my theatre training, my music training in different genres of music, it all comes together, and the spoken word comes together. And I think it's important for me because I am sort of talking of a unification, of a oneness. So I'm open to putting in all these influences. And as I was mentioning to you earlier, even in Alfat, we brought in the Irish sound on an Indian instrument. So it's kind of nice because it also pushes me to experiment that much more.
Right.
Yeah.
So all this must have required a lot of learning of different languages and everything. So when did you start your...
I think as a musician, and it's probably true of all musicians, that when you have a good ear, you are able to pick up many different languages, and you're able to sing in many different languages, even if you can't speak in them. So I'm able to sing in many different languages, but I do have a love for the lyric and beautiful poetry. So if every time I approach a kalam or I approach poetry, I do understand what it means first. And then I put in, based on my understanding of that, of the deeper meaning of the kalam, I'm able to then put in the different elements that work for me intuitively. Most of this, like I said, is based on gut and intuition and what feels right. And like I said, the research is the intellect part. So it's always a blend of intuition and intellect.
Oh my, that's really very interesting. So who's your favorite poet?
I mean, one of my favorite poets would definitely be Faiz Ahmad Faiz. I mean, his vast repertoire of work, and the many themes that he covered. Faiz Saab was a great favorite. Shiv Batalvi was a favorite. Amrita Pritam. But, India, Kabir Das, Bulle Shah, India's been blessed with such a wealth of great poetry, so that literally every corner that you looked, you could find beautiful poetry. Mirabai wrote beautifully. There were so many beautiful poets. So I think that I'm inspired by all the many thoughts. Rumi, I think...
I love Rumi.
Yeah, so one is inspired by so many different poets, and it's exciting to be able to have this treasure trove that one can delve into now, thanks to the internet as well, that you can literally find the poetry of so many poets at your fingertips, and that can inspire you to think differently, to compose differently, and open your mind in many different creative ways.
Right. Yeah. We have a very, very rich culture.
We do. Well, honestly, thrilled to have been born an Indian.
Same.
There is no other place in the world I would have wished to have been born, and there is no other avatar I would have wished to have been born in. I was talking recently about, there was a Women's Day award that happened, and I was thinking about the fact that when I was growing up, there were many friends of mine who would say, I wish I'd been born a boy. Boys are so lucky. They have so much freedom. They don't have to go through childbirth, this, that. And never in my life have I ever wished to have been born anything other than a woman. I think it is the greatest blessing to have been born a woman. You have so many different beautiful layers. You are so many different avatars in one. And you have so many different strengths. You have love, you have compassion, you have fierceness, you have, protectiveness, you have sensitivity, a depth of love that no man can possibly feel. In fact, even Rumi, since we were talking about Rumi, Rumi has likened women to the creator. He says women are not just, women are not just created, they are creative, which means they are capable of creation themselves. And even poets like Amir Khusro or Baba Bulleh Shah, all of them, interestingly enough, these poets, when they wanted to write of their love for the beloved, they used to write in the feminine form. So when Chhap Tilak, Amir Khusro writes in the feminine form. Baba Bulleh Shah often dressed as a woman because they believed it was only a woman's heart that was capable of such deep love without ego and of complete surrender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, ma'am, they always say a woman can do everything that a man can do.
And more.
And more.
I grew up in a house where my father told us we were not equal to men. I have 2 elder sisters. He said, you're not equal to men, you're better. And we just grew up knowing and believing that we can do everything that men can do, but we can do it slightly better or much better.
Because of our emotional side, our empathy.
I mean, even I think women can handle conflict situations better. Women can deal with so much, really.
The sixth sense in us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's time women took over the world.
Right. So, ma'am, as a voting member of the Grammy Recording Academy, how do you think the current landscape of global music has changed?
I mean, I think there have been so many changes in the last 14 years from the time I started performing professionally to the availability. I mean, if you look at just the way Instagram has made music so easily available, it's been great in so many ways because so many people who didn't really have a platform to present their music have now got a stage. Instagram is the easiest stage to get on. You can literally perform from home. You can become a viral sensation overnight. So that's been great. You can be discovered by, other musicians, by record labels. It's great in that sense. It's created a sense of democracy. It's opened doors. The other changes that have happened is, and this I felt has been happening for a while now, is I feel that there are so many covers being put out, covers of original songs, that I wonder what's going to happen to original music. The thing is, people are just getting used to, getting popular by covering someone else's very popular song. Right. And I don't know if those artists then feel that, should I put in the work that it takes to create an original song? Because creating an original song means a lot of work. Whereas singing a cover that's really popular will get you the views, will get you the likes, will get you the shares, and maybe you'll become viral quickly.
It's like nepotism, sort of.
It's not really nepotism. I think it's just that it's the easy way out, right? If I do what everybody's doing, the chance of it being liked is greater than if I decide to find my own path and do something different. There's a chance it will be liked, but there's a huge chance it may not be liked. So then that encouragement for original music, I feel like, I hope that it doesn't go down, the desire to create original music. Because if you know that you can do the easy way out, where you just listen to a song and you copy it, everything's already been created for you. The tune's been created for you, the words are there. You don't have to do anything really other than practice it and sing it. And suddenly everyone's like, wow, you're an amazing musician, you're so great. But if you were the musician who actually had first sat down, written those lyrics, created that composition, then put it out there, obviously that's much more work. So I feel like this is something that worries me a little bit, because I don't want people to lose interest in creating original music. And similarly, what's happening is audiences then are now so, you'll be at a concert and someone will say, unka ye gana suna do, inka ye gana suna do. But what about your original music? Audiences also now, because they're getting used to just listening to covers. So the idea is that there should always be space for original music. So that, I think, has been a bit of a change in the global landscape. The other good stuff that's been happening is there have been so many more concerts happening. We have access to concerts. Even if you're not at a concert, you can see it on Instagram, YouTube. All of that has been really good stuff. The digital age has really helped musicians find a voice. And I think that, so it's been mostly good. I would say there's been a huge turning point. It's been good. People who hadn't been heard before in a remote part of the world can be heard. And it's amazing, right? My only concern is this small percentage where I'm not concerned hugely, but I wonder about it every now and then, that I hope that it doesn't take away space for original music, this obsession with covers and cover
So
music.
do you also see this as a challenge?
Challenge as in, like I said, I mean, I do believe it's a challenge. I wish that people would understand that it's important to struggle in order to create new music. And the struggle is part of the journey, right? So it's not always the best decision to find the easy way out. It's fine to do a few covers. And I do also understand that some people do covers and then they feel like if they get an audience base, then they'll release their original music, which is also not a bad way of doing it. But I am, as I said, I'm a little unsure. I'm a little concerned about which way this cover story is going to go. You know, this
Right.
doing of covers. Is it going to just remove space for original music, or will it do something different? And only time will tell.
And this is particularly happening with the old music as well, like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of old music. And like I said, people become huge stars. Suddenly you have 70,000 followers because you've sung like Jagale, or you've sung like, you know, 5 of the songs which have been done so beautifully by the originals. And it's very nice that you're paying tribute to them. But then, fine, do your own stuff also. Don't forget that as an artist, it's important for you to create your own original music. At least I believe that.
Have your own individuality.
Identity, and also I believe that you should have something to say as an artist, right?
Right.
And what is it that you want to say? Do you only want to say what everyone else has said before you, or do you also want to have something important to say yourself?
Right. And now, any other challenges that you faced when you just started out in the music industry?
Well, I mean, I think that I've been asked this question a lot. I have always worked without a manager, right, for the most part of my life. So I've had to manage everything on my own. And yes, you could look at it as a challenge, but I didn't look at it as a challenge. I looked at it as a learning. So I think it's been great for me because I've had hands-on experience for everything. So I can manage myself. I can do everything from setting up my stage to creating my own lights. I know enough about sound. I know enough about everything now to put a show together, even if there was no one. So that's been good. But of course, there is the challenge that, you know, you get sometimes tired managing everything on your own. That's been one issue perhaps, but not I still would look at it as a reward rather than a challenge. The challenging thing is occasionally as a woman, you've been faced with someone who's not going to take you seriously. And I realized early on that in order to get taken seriously, I needed to come across not just as sweet and polite, I needed to come across as firm. Yeah, and bold, because, you know, they see a woman and they think, she's very sweet, and to kuch nahi kahengi. And the minute you sort of take a stand, they realize, okay, she's not someone we want to mess with. So I've had to take that, even though it wasn't really something I wanted to do, but I had to do it. But the most interesting challenge, I would say, or the most interesting revelation that's come to me, and I find it so interestingly archaic, is that, so I was telling you I have 3 babies. I have 3 children who are, Noor is 5.5, and Meher and Nirvera are my twins who are 4. But after I had the children, I got asked literally by every single person, friends, just, you know, people that I would know, acquaintances, as well as people in the business, that are you still going to sing? And I thought, why should I stop singing just because I've had children? And I remember there was somebody who called and said, you know, we want to ask you to come for a concert, and we're so lucky we got your number because we reached out to some agency and they said, no, she stopped singing, she's had children. And I thought, are we living like in 1920 or something?
The stereotypical question.
Yeah, and why? Why should I stop singing? I mean, I have more to bring to the table now because I've experienced yet another part of life, right? And being an artist is putting all your experiences into your art. And now I've experienced what it feels like to open my heart up even more to find space for this new love that I have for the children.
Experience unconditional love.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've always had dogs, so I've experienced unconditional love from the very start. But it's been a different kind of love. It's been a different kind of learning. It's been a different kind of opening of my mind. It's been a different kind of learning of patience, of sabr, of shakti, of different things, right? And I'm sure that will trickle down into my music. So now there's a new person that's, you know, and we are ever evolving as human beings, and every experience teaches us. Like, I don't know, you don't know this, but I survived the tsunami as well. I was underwater, yeah. So that changed me as well. We can get to that. But there have been so many different things in my life. So just because I've experienced something doesn't mean I'm going to stop singing. And I do not want my children at all to think that I'm that kind of mother who, because I had children, stopped working. I want them to look at, especially my 2 daughters and my son, I want my son to know that it's totally okay for a woman to work the kind of crazy hours that I work, and for her to prioritize this love and this passion that she has, so that when he gets married to someone, he can understand her things that are important to her. And my daughters, absolutely, to see that choose what makes you happy and do it then with 100%, and find partners who will accept you.
Of course.
For this passion that you have, or this talent that you have, and will not hold you back because of some traditional societal norm, or, you know, of what society thinks that you should behave like, or how you should be, or, you know, none of this stuff. I mean, these old ideas of good mother, good wife, bad wife, none of this stuff. I mean, this is not going to be the stuff my children are growing up with. So, yeah, so I think that was an interesting challenge when I heard this a couple of times. And I thought, wow, like, we still think like that?
Yeah, we still ask the questions.
As I was telling you, in the tsunami of 2004, my husband and I were in Sri Lanka in Ventocha. And we were on the beach when the tsunami hit. And we didn't have time to make it back to our hotel. We were in the premises. So we climbed onto a cabana, which was about 4 feet high, and we thought we'd be safe and the water would go past. But over time, the water quantity kept increasing, and before we knew it, we were underwater, and we were holding on to pillars for dear life. And I was holding on to my husband, and there was darkness because the water had gone over our heads. And there was that moment, I think, I remember asking my God, the divine power, will we be okay? And I knew we would be okay, because I literally heard a voice that said we would be okay. And when we came out of that and we came back eventually to India, I think both my husband and I knew that our lives had to amount to something, that we wanted this life on this earth to mean something, that we were here, we were saved for a reason. And I think that was further testament for me about wanting to say something through my music, So it was very important for me then to sing, not just to be a singer, but to be a musician with a message.
I think such experiences change your entire perspective to
Absolutely.
And they give you a whole new purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think they help you see really the reason you're here. Why are we all here? Are we here just to sort of saunter through life, or are we here to leave some sort of legacy or make an impact, no matter how small? But right. And I'd like to believe that each of us is here to make some kind of impact, a small impact in this world.
True.
And do some good.
True.
No?
I completely agree. And ma'am, can you describe about a performance at the Sacred Spirit Festival?
It's every single performance that I've done, and people would probably think that I'm not being serious, but really I remember every single performance I've done, because it's like choosing your favorite child. How do you choose the favorite child? You can't choose a favorite child or a favorite dog. But every single performance has been really special. The Sacred Spirit Festival was also lovely because I got to collaborate with Rajasthani musicians, and I've done this in the past, but this was even more special, I think, because I got to collaborate with Rajasthani female musicians. Two ladies called the Dangi sisters who sing Rajwara music, and it was really nice because on stage there was a lot of feminine energy that particular day when we got onto stage for our final performance. There was a lot of feminine energy, and they brought their gentle feminine energy. I brought my energy, and we were accompanied by men. And so it was really special because there was not just a cross-cultural exchange of ideas, of musicalities, but there was a sort of exchange between these feminine powers as well, which was very special. And more recently, I've done a track which is going to be released soon, where I've also worked with a feminine energy. I've worked with an Iranian female artist. And she and I, it was the most incredible experience to collaborate together. She has done the art for my animated video for the song that I have written. It's the first time I wrote in Punjabi when I wrote that song. And we're going to be releasing it soon. But it was very exciting because we did it cross continents, cross cities first. She was in India first, but it was cross cities. Then it became cross continents. And we finally finished it. I think she was in Nepal at some point. Then she was somewhere else. And it finally ended with her being in Australia and me being in India. And we finished the song over a long period of time, over continents. And it was very exciting. The language was a bit of a barrier as well. And yet the product that's come out it looks like we were both exactly on the same page. And I think that perhaps also has to do with a woman understanding another woman intuitively, being connected in some ways. And she's also Sufi, so I think we got that essence as well. So it's a very beautiful project, and I think it's very important for me to have worked with an Iranian women, because Iranian women's voices have been suppressed for so long. So to have an Iranian woman whose voice comes through her art, it's been even more
That
special
makes
for me.
it more special, and it must have been a different journey from the rest of the songs.
So like I said, every single performance has been special in its own way, a special journey, a special story, whether it's in the performance that, where you sing and somebody says something special to you after a performance, or whether you went through a personal challenge or you created a new piece. So each performance is really special for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, what advice would you give to the aspiring singers?
Gosh, I think the only advice I constantly give to any musician, young musician that asks me is listen to incredible musicians, because we all do, and I still do. Listen to incredible musicians. Emulate, but don't imitate.
Right.
Because there can only be one of a particular kind of artist, right? There can only be one Abida Parveen. There can only be one Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab. There can only be one Shobha Gurtu. There can only be one of each of us. There can only be one of you and one of me.
Of course.
So emulate, don't imitate. Take all these influences in and then create your own way of presenting them. Put a little bit of your soul into it so that it becomes it becomes undoubtedly you that people hear, not a copy of X or a copy of Y. No, but also, like, if you don't have to sound like someone else, right? You can still sound like yourself with influences of someone else. And if you add a lot of yourself into the piece, then it will become you. So that's very important. The other piece of advice I would give to aspiring musicians is don't get afraid of the struggle. Know that there will be struggle. There will always be struggle. There will always be struggle, and there should always be struggle, because it is only through struggle that you evolve. It is only through struggle that you learn. So don't be afraid of the struggle. Understand that the struggle is one of the most important parts of your journey. It is one of your most important teachers. Struggling, facing obstacles, facing challenges, those are the teachers that you need in your life in order to become better, in order to evolve. So don't be afraid and don't say, I don't want to struggle. I want to struggle. That's who I am. I've always wanted to struggle. I've always wanted to struggle, so that through struggle, through pushing, when I move an inch forward, I say, wow, I did it. I moved that inch forward. So yeah, for me, it's important. And that's the advice I would give aspiring musicians as well.
I think that's a very important advice, ma'am, because most of us are scared of the struggle these days. We are so comfortable in our life, in our own routine, that anything that is not going according to us, we're like, forget it, we're not doing it. Yeah. That's become very common.
So step out of your comfort zone and enjoy the few knocks, and like, get into the boxing ring, feel the knocks, and understand that you will only come out of it stronger, having learned more.
Right. How do themes of devotion and self-belief influence your songwriting and performances?
So I think, as I mentioned to you earlier, the lyric is really important to me. Powerful, meaningful poetry is very important to me. So that really influences me. If it really moves me to a point where I get goosebumps, or I feel like I'm overwhelmed and I break into tears sometimes just reading poetry, then I know for a fact that this is something I want to compose. Like when it was Faiz Sahab's, Bol ke lab azad hai tere, bol zaban ab tak teri hai. That was self-belief. It was about using your voice, knowing that you have this strong tool. Don't feel that just because you don't have a weapon in your hand, or that you can't make a difference in this world. Just your voice, just your own person, being you, can make a difference, as long as you can be yourself in a place of strength, and know that you have the strength within you, each of us, and we're capable of being able to make that change. So that, obviously, it touched me so much that I was able to compose it, and I wanted to compose it. Or whether it's another like Man Manam, which you were talking about earlier.
That song.
Yeah, and so Man Manam is something we composed for Coke Studio, and I was sure when I heard it, I mean, I was wondering, I said, it's in Persian. I'm going to do a song. My first song for Coke Studio will be in Persian, and no one will understand it. And I kept wondering, should I do it? Should I not do it? But the words were so powerful. The poetry was so powerful to me that I said, you know what? When I'm 65 years old and I look back at my life and what I've achieved, I want to say that I did something that was had some gravitas to it, had some weight to it. And this was so beautiful. Man Manam is मैं हूँ भी और नहीं भी, तेरे इश्क में मैं इतना खोया हूँ कि मैं इस दुनिया में हूँ भी और नहीं भी. It's about man's relationship with God and God's relationship perhaps even with man. And I thought it was so beautiful that it influenced me enough to take that risk of releasing a song that was in Persian, which I thought no one could understand. And I said, you know what? If it's beautiful enough, if I'm able to compose it beautifully enough, it will touch people even if they don't understand the lyric. And as you just said, it did. And many other people have said this. So I think that when I read a piece of poetry, as I said, I trust my gut. If it really moves me, then I believe that perhaps it will, like it's moved me, it'll move some other people as well. And so that's really, I think, my barometer and how I gauge if I want to work on a piece of poetry or not.
Being true to yourself.
Yeah, and believing that the poetry in itself is so beautiful. Or, you know, when I'm writing something, does it move me? Does it give me these goosebumps? Does it bring me to tears? Does it create a churning inside me that, you know, that's from a place that I can't, that's a bit inexplicable,
Right.
You know? Then I know that perhaps it is right. And it doesn't always pay off. Sometimes you can be moved by something, but other people are not. But at the end of the day, as you said very rightly, at least I've been true to myself. And that for me, I think, is the most important thing.
Because, ma'am, when I first heard the song Man Manam, I obviously didn't understand it, but it touched my heart, it touched my soul so much. It was so soothing. I felt so calm in my mind. I was like to my husband that you must listen to this song. I played it on the speaker, and we all really just enjoyed
Thank you so much.
listening to it.
That just, you know, that makes me feel really good to hear you say that, because that's really what I was trying to do. Hoping that that music would truly transcend these boundaries of language and, you know.
Yeah, that is beautiful. That number is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm looking ahead. What projects or collaborations are you most excited about?
Well, I mean, we have lots of, it's been interesting. Over the years, one has been so busy performing and traveling that whenever we've had a chance, we've gone into the studio or, you know, during a performance, you've created a new piece. You haven't had the chance to go into the studio to record it. This year, I took a very, very strong decision to actually put some of that music out there. So this year will be, you know, we will be releasing a lot of the music that's been in the studio that's unfinished. We'll be finishing a lot of it, putting it all out. So that's definitely going to be a very important part. This collaboration I've done with the Iranian artist is going to come out. There is talk of doing a couple of more collaborations, but there's still kind of fingers crossed situation, so I'm not going to jinx them by talking about them. But mostly, I think the music, there will be much more music that I will be putting out there. So hopefully that will happen.
I'm very excited, and I'm sure our listeners are excited too.
Thank you.
Your voice is so melodious and it is so soothing and calming. I think we're all hooked on to your music.
Thank you so much. You're so kind.
We'll keep looking forward to the new releases and support you full on.
Thank you. And I hope that Femme Forward, you know, grows with leaps and bounds, and we see more of Femme Forward as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thank you.